Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Mending the Sacred Hoop, TA's webinar series about key issues and promising practices. We are so excited to have you here. My name is Jill Belfi. I am the Learning and Resource Coordinator at Mending the Sacred Hoop in Duluth, Minnesota, where we have sunshine. I love to report whenever we do. It's quite a blessing. Again, I'm so happy to be here with you. I'm so thrilled and honored, truly honored, to have our two panelists today, Nicole Matthews and Linda Thompson of MUSAC. And they are going to talk to us today about weaving our wisdom by decolonizing our work. And again, they are two wonderfully gifted, knowledgeable women that I am so excited to hear from today, and I hope you are as well. I do want to mention too that as this is a webinar series, we are going to be offering 2 webinars a month through November. You can look for those in your newsletter. You can also go to our website, Mending the Sacred Hoop. It's MSH-hoop.org, and you can go to the tab listed below, and you can go ahead and look and register right there if you don't receive a newsletter, and join us through November. We are having some wonderful, wonderful presenters. Next up is Tuesday, April 27th. Jennifer Pierce Weeks is going to join us and talk to us about sexual assault and intimate partner relationships. So please, if you haven't already registered, please do so and join us for that. That is sure to be another informational webinar from Mending the Sacred Hoop. Before we get started, a couple housekeeping items that I just want to mention. And if you do a lot of webinars, you've probably already been through this, so you can tune me out. But if not, do pay attention that today's webinar is a little different too. Nicole and Linda asked that this be more of a conversational webinar. So as your comments and questions come up, don't hold them in, don't hold them back, don't wait for a better time. Now is the time to get those answered. And the way we're going to have you do that today, as this is Zoom webinar and not Zoom meeting, utilize that raise hand function. And when you do, I will enable your microphone. And so you can introduce yourself, where you're coming from if you'd like, and ask your question or share your comment at that time when I unmute you. Again, as this is a Zoom webinar, everybody's video is enabled aside from the hosts and the co-hosts and the panelists. So we will not be able to have you on camera. It's a bandwidth thing, and so that is not an option today, but the audio is. Alternatively, if you don't want to speak, you can also chat your question or comment straight in the chat box, or you can post it to the Q&A. If you have any technical issues, my colleague Holly is standing by to help you with that. You can either chat her as well directly, or you can email her, and her email is provided there. So if you have any questions or anything, she can definitely help you. Internet, slow internet, probably won't be able to help you with that, but she definitely will be able to help you get back on Zoom or any other issues that might come up. So with that, we're going to get started. And before we do, I have a fun little vision activity to do with our two presenters. And I will start, that's how you do it. You got to be a good participant by engaging in that way. So my vision activity for today for our two presenters, and actually I'd appreciate it if you as participants did it as well. You don't have to share it, but you can just practice and doing the visioning. Is today where you're at in your emotional state, your mental state, even your physical state, what sort of landscape do you picture yourself as being today? So if you want to take a moment to close your eyes, if need be, really sink in deep and feel into your heart center, what landscape are you feeling today? And for me, right away, it comes, and I am those billowy cumulus nimbus clouds. They're mostly light and fluffy and airy with some pockets of intensity. That's my landscape piece for today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Nicole. Nicole, how are you feeling today? What sort of landscape are you?
Wow. I should have asked for that ahead of time. Good morning, everyone. Let's see. What kind of landscape am I feeling today? The first thing I thought of was I feel kind of like a forest today. I feel kind of like there's a lot of depth to where I'm at today. There's a lot of trees and fullness. And yeah, so that's kind of how I'm feeling today.
That's beautiful. Thank you very much. How about you, Linda?
I'm feeling like I'm on the prairie somewhere and I can see a long distance as long as my eyes will work that far out. I do want to see what is coming, what is near me, what is, you know, so I feel like I'm in the wide open.
Isn't that beautiful? Thank you. You brought me to somewhere in South Dakota just when you said that. I'm not even sure where. Very beautiful. Thank you. Awesome. Well, I'm very excited to hear from you, Nicole and Linda. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to them. And again, any questions or comments, please feel free to use that raise hand function.
Thank you, Jill. Again, good morning, everyone. My name is Nicole Matthews. I'm the Executive Director at the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. And I'm really excited to be here with you all today. Linda, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Linda, and I work for the Minnesota Indian Women's Sexual Assault Coalition. And we just got off of our morning check-in with the staff, and we had a huge conversation about this very topic. And it's something that is really, it gives me a lot of good feelings. So I'm hoping that we can share that from our spirit to your spirit, and in the best way possible, that there is a good understanding. Nothing we're saying is trying to offend anybody. It's just we came up with this information we do what's called a visioning meeting every year. And it is with our circle keepers, which other orgs call their board of directors. And then we had a guided conversation for a couple of days with staff from Move to End Violence. Am I saying that right? Is that who it is? Okay. And it helped us to really think about what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing, and then how we're doing it. And then a vision was created on a new way to be thoughtful while we're doing the work that we all love so much. So thank you.
And I see Guadalupe's on here, but I wasn't sure if she was going to join. So Guadalupe, are you able to do an introduction, or are you gonna, I don't want to put you on the spot if you're unable to talk at this time. All right, maybe I'll just see if she's able to. We can always come back. Oh, she was, let's see. Guadalupe? All right. Well, I'm going to share my screen and start and open. Oh, let's see. Sorry, technology. You would think after a year of Zoom, I would have this all figured out. But we are still. Can everyone see that? All right. And Guadalupe, feel free to message in the chat if you want. So we really, normally this workshop would be in person. We would have a conversation. We would do some moving around and facilitated talks, and it would not be, over Zoom this way. So, but this is what we have. So we are going to make the best of it. But please use the chat function. There's also the Q&A if you have a question. And we'll just get started. And Guadalupe, I did ask, sorry, I'm trying to ask if you were going to join in, but if you at any point wanted to jump in, feel free. Okay. So, I think first we want to have a conversation about what habits really get in our way when we talk about, in order to have a conversation about decolonizing, I think we have to talk and think about colonization and the impact of colonization. Somebody is not muted, and I think it's someone. It says mending the sacred hoop, so I'm assuming it's Jill or there. Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of colonization and what habits really get in our way to decolonizing. So one of those things is, and Linda, I thought you and I would just go back and forth on these. Is that okay?
That's great.
Okay. So I can start. And one of the things is either or thinking. So when I think of that, I think about how, it's that dichotomous thinking, right? It's either black or white. And if you like, it's kind of like when you think of, I think one of the biggest things I've seen in the last few years is when we talk about Black Lives Matter, people say, yeah, but all lives matter, right? It's like, if we say this, it means to the exclusion of everything else. It can't be a both and. Of course, of course all lives matter, right? But let's have a focus on where there is a particular, harm created in our communities and in our country. And so that's what I think of when I think of either or thinking. And I also want to invite people to type in the chat if there are other examples. Also, I think of, things are either good or they're bad, right? There's no in between. Like, we hardly talk about the gray areas in between. It's either good or it's bad. It's right or it's wrong. It's either us or it's against us. It's very closely linked to perfectionism and makes it difficult to learn from our mistakes or to accommodate any sort of conflict, right? There's no sense that things can be both and it creates conflict and increases a sense of urgency as people feel that they have to make decisions to do either this or that. And I also want to acknowledge, and we have it on the bottom of this page, that this is taken from Dismantling Racism, and you can download this entire book. You can Google it and you can pull it up, and it's pretty easy to download.
I think that when we're doing the either or thinking, if we are treating ourselves like that, then we most certainly listen differently and view differently our partners, our coworkers, the people that we're providing service to. So we want to be really careful with that rigid thinking, right? So we want to be more inclusive and give people the time and the space to be who they are and to be able to listen with an open mind and an open heart, opposed to automatically, it takes, I know they can prove this, but we are so quick to judge each other. It's within, I think, 12 seconds. We make up our mind about if we like this person or if we don't. So we want to take that back and just sit and listen to what somebody is saying. So, and then give ourselves some room, because we'll cause major anxiety and stress with that type of thinking, which in turn causes sickness and disease and not feeling good overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I know sometimes, people will say, well, do you want this or that? And sometimes I just answer yes. And it confuses people because they're like, well, what do you mean? It's either this or it's that. And the answer is, like, we can have both and, right? It doesn't have to be either this or that. All right, Linda, you want to talk about defensiveness?
Sure. What I am thinking when I'm reading that is when I'm listening to something either in conversation or in a larger group discussion, or maybe I'm at a meeting or a rally, that I can be listening to where I'm waiting to be offended. instead of being offended, I should just listen because I want to take everything personally and make it about me. And really that is, it's my ego that wants to be mad or upset. And instead of being defensive, just to wait again and listen and to see where is this going, and really do I have to defend myself. But it also puts up a barrier or a wall where I'm not going to hear anymore. Once I'm defensive, or I feel like I'm defensive because I feel offended, then I quit listening and I quit responding in a way that is helping us to both grow from where we're sitting right this minute. Does that make sense, Nicole?
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And it really gets in the way to like doing any work, right? Because we have that when you're coming from a place of defensiveness, it's a battle, right? Like you're ready to go to war. You're ready to like fight for your whatever your opinion is or your beliefs are, rather than sitting in the learning and the understanding and hearing, right? And so it's that defensiveness stance. And again, please, people, if there's things that, if you have additional thoughts, put them in the chat. We want to hear you as well. And at any time, if there's conversation, if there's something you want to contribute, please let us know or raise your hand. And then perfectionism. I know I have, for so many years, that's been one of the biggest things for me is perfectionism and wanting to do everything perfect. And we all know, there really is no perfect, right? And it really hurts us. And we set ourselves up when we get in that mindset of perfectionism. And we look at, mistakes are seen as personal. So if I have a belief of perfectionism, then all the mistakes are mine, right? And we don't look at our responsibility to each other, how we are all working together. We look at how that one person or one mistake, and it can feel devastating when we're trying to get everything perfect, right? Rather than having that understanding. And Guadalupe wrote in the chat how many factors can influence how a person responds to short and long-term effects of the abuse. Absolutely. And sometimes that's how people, how it impacts people who've experienced violence is perfectionism and trying to make everything perfect.
Also,
and I think,
did you see Stacy also mentioned the limiting belief system in the chat? Yeah.
Thank you, Stacy. And thank you, Jill, for bringing, I didn't see that. Absolutely. It totally limits, when we think about colonization and the impact of colonization and all of these habits that get in our way, it is very limiting, right? Because there's so much beyond that. Linda, you want to talk about sense of urgency?
Well, I think this can come up as an individual, but more internal, and then other people pick up on it, that I have to get things done. I have to get it done right now, right now, right now, right now. And I want things done right now, right now, right now, or why wasn't this done yesterday, or whatever. But the sense of urgency is a habit that is time and money, and those values might be different than how we may have been raised, or the values that we are trying to live by, which is that we've heard this before, that it gets done on Indian time, and for some things like grant reports and submissions of grants, those things are different, but that they have time. But healing and being supportive is continual, and it doesn't have like a certain time frame that we're going to be following. And sometimes people can't get things done as soon as we would like, but they get their things done in a way that works for them. And you can make, I know that some people have had this associated with their, sometimes the military, and the things that are from a part of our blood memory of whether it was boarding school or whatever, that there's a whole different way of doing things that feels more rigid. And so if I am moved to do things right now and get this done, and I don't know what the thought was behind this, but I think it is that it doesn't make room for people who don't move, like this, or they didn't get it done right now, that there's not that space. It actually can work to be somewhat abusive and cause people stress, and a lot of other things happen. If in that sense of urgency, we can actually give that to other people. Some of us did that to our kids, when we were raising them, and talked about that. We have to be on time, and we have to do it like this, and we have to, and then that comes back over into how we are in our workspace, which probably wasn't healthy for us to begin with. And I do understand things need to be done, and there's certain times, but I've heard the native perspective on daylight savings time is, is kind of funny, in that they actually thought by either adding or leaving it, adding an hour, that we could save. It's that kind of a framework when you're thinking, is that things will get done, and I love Nicole's, if we didn't feel like we're prepared enough, or like there was enough work into it, she just, says, well, it's going to be great. Please don't worry about it. It's going to be great. No, that's how I believe it.
And it is. It's always, everything always works out the way it's supposed to. So it's always great.
Can I interrupt for a moment? I love this conversation. And Linda, what you're bringing up about the sense of urgency, for me, growing up in Detroit Lakes, Minnesota, and being raised by two parents who are going, I've found that I've had to very consciously break that sense of urgency in my daily life. I just feel like I'm always needing to be doing something, going somewhere. And then I stop and say, well, why? The question is, why do you feel so urgent about it? And it truly has been, for me, and I don't know if other attendees feel this way, a habit that needs to be broken. And it's not a bad thing. It's not a good thing. It's just a habit that needs to be acknowledged and made aware of. And then I chose to break it, So I appreciate you guys bringing that up. Thank you.
Yeah. And it creates chaos, because when you have someone who has that sense of urgency, it kind of ripples out to other people, and it gives you anxiety when someone's like, we gotta go, we gotta do this, we gotta do. And I used to have a boss like that, and man, when she was around, it creates it gives you a stomach ache. You feel this anxiety from someone who's constantly like, pushing for more, and you gotta do it faster, and it has to be right now, and everything is a crisis, right?
It truly is. And then we pass it on to our children, and that's the unfortunate part. But I'm just glad that we are all becoming aware of it and beginning to break it. Before we move on, I want to mention Christopher said, country is trending in the right direction to eradicate forms of violence. Secretary Haaland initiated a MMIW unit within DOI. President Biden today announced future action on Title IX to address school campus sexual assault violence.
That's awesome.
And then Cinnamon just mentioned collective rather than individualistic.
Yes, absolutely. Which, goes into the next one on individualism, right? And it's all, and that's how a lot of, corporate companies work, where it's about me, and I got to do what I need to do so that I can get ahead. And for people, we see what's in it for me, right? Like that's kind of the sense in our country, is the what's in it for me, and how do I get ahead, and how do I get more, and how do I succeed? And I think for us, when I think about our Indigenous communities prior to colonization, it was about the interconnection with each other, right? So it wasn't about individualism. It was about all of us being part of the whole, and how are we all contributing to all of our success, to making sure that we all are fed, that all of our communities are healthy, that all of us are well. It's not about any one person, right? Because we need each other. We need all of us.
And it was an understanding that what affects you inadvertently does affect all of us and me. It affects me. People that look at things from an individual might just be concerned about them and their family. And while that's their primary concern, and it is correct in a lot of things, if I go out and I do a lot of other things that cause harm to the environment, or I hoard all the toilet paper, or I grab all of the paper towels, or I take all the sanitizer, that's not the tribal think, which
Right.
would be, I want to be thinking about all of us, which is in understanding that whatever we do affects the next few generations. So that thinking more broad and inclusive, opposed to about just me and mine.
And Chastity Sandoval in the chat said, and being fully conscious and to engage. Yes, absolutely.
So these two kind of go together, the individualism and the power hoarding. So when we have somebody who might be the supervisor or a director or a chairman or maybe a district rep or the congressman or the senator or somebody who has the law enforcement, somebody who has power, what is perceived as power, is they want to be the one who makes all the decisions about everything. And I actually had somebody from a program tell me that they had to learn how to write all the grants on their own, and nobody helped them to learn what funding was available. And I said, well, are you going to show a couple of other staff or a couple community members how to do that work? And what she told me was, she said, nobody showed me what to do, so I'm not showing anybody. For me, it's job security in my community. And I said, well, wait now, what about your community that's going to need the funding if something should ever, God forbid, happen to you? Or if someday you take a different job. Now, people could have been learning alongside of you. And so we'll have people who don't show other people how to do things. I've met people who never saw a budget and never saw a narrative. They were just given a job description. And so they were in the dark about where did this come from and how does it work? So that's the one aspect I'm thinking that I'm supposed to talk about, is about people who hold on to the power. Are they make decisions that affect a lot of different people without talking to different people. And we do want, it's not about us without us. And as Native people, we have really tried to sit at tables that weren't comfortable, so that we make sure that our voice, not my individual voice, but the voice of the many people that I've advocated for, the survivors, is present everywhere that I'm going. It's not just about me, it's about everybody else and the people that I know and I love and I care for from our communities, that we share any type of wisdom or any type of understanding that has brought better peace to us as individuals, but also to our programs and our communities. It should be shared power. Of course, there's going to be somebody who's held accountable with signatures and that kind of stuff, but really the knowledge base. We have at our organization a really open policy. We do the grants together. We do the narrative reports together. It's shared. We make decisions about what's coming up at our conferences together. And I thought, I didn't know how, and it can be, I got to balance my sense of responsibility, because as a former director of a tribal program and of a coalition, I felt the enormous weight of responsibility and did not really have the trust to think that I would just let somebody else do that. But also that can border some control stuff. So I really had to learn and let go of some of my need to know that it was done, whatever some people might say, oh, if you want it done the right way, do it yourself. But really, if you want it done in a way that reflects all of us, we have to share that. I don't know. Can you think of any other way to say that, Nicole?
No, I think that's perfect. And I think it's really connected too to competition and how we compete with each other, right? And rather than, again, working together. And Brittany Garcia said in the chat, it's the crab mentality, pulling others into the bucket instead of helping to get out of the bucket. It's totally that crab mentality, right? It's like the power hoarding, the competition, like it's all so connected in how, we are, fighting with each other rather than working together for the betterment of all of our people. And then we have the worship of the written word, which I think is huge, right? And you think about many of our histories were oral histories, and so we didn't have the written word. And some of the reasons that we don't have, that our land was taken was because we didn't have that understanding of the written word. And we, of course, there's language barriers as well. But how many of you have been in a job before or any sort of position before where there was an expectation that whether it's writing grants or writing something, and if you didn't have those skills, we feel less than, right? Where that may not be my strength is in writing. And that's why, as Linda said, we do everything together. There might be one person who kind of puts a framework together and then, someone else who puts in some of the meat and the bones, like puts it all together, and someone who kind of polishes it all off in the end to kind of make it beautiful. And some of us are better at talking. And so we, we'll have someone who can put it into words, but it can really make you feel, at least I have felt before, because in our country, there's such a worship of the written word. It makes me feel less than. I've been part of a collaborative project before where there was, non-native partners who were really great at writing and developing written resources. And that's not necessarily our strength, right? And so there was kind of a feeling of like, hey, are you really pulling your weight here because you're not doing the written part? And so really, I think it's important to have that conversation about what is that, and how do we put that aside and really value all of our contributions, right? Because we all have different pieces that we contribute, whether it's someone who's really, I have relatives who are authors and who are beautiful writers. It's not necessarily my skill. I can do okay once in a while, but it takes all of us to contribute. All right, I think we talked about competition. Linda, do you want to talk about fear of open conflict?
Well, I think that some people get the idea of conflict, and then they think of fighting, that it means that there's going to be something negative. But what can happen is if I have a misunderstanding with one of the staff or with somebody else in my personal life, that maybe I don't talk about it because I don't want a big blow up or a big discussion that can lead to really bad feelings, or that some people call it spilling the tea, that I'm going to tell you the truth and this is not going to be, good. But the truth is that when I share how I feel and I'm listening to you respectfully, that you tell me how you feel, there can actually be growth, not just to our relationship, whether it's work or personal, but also to how we're doing our work together, that I might not have understood. So, but my fear of conflict might make it so I never say anything. But every time I get around this person, my stomach hurts, or I feel like I'm gonna, get nervous about it, or they're bringing something up that I know I don't agree with them on. That's how we change as humans and as society, is by having these conversations and helping people to tell the truth about how something is impacting them, and then about what can we do to resolve it, because we want things to be fair and equitable and equal as much as possible, but also where we're not harming each other. And I think when we think of conflict, you know, it doesn't have to include, you know, people yelling or raising their voices or swearing or getting mad or telling three other people why I think so and so is wrong. It has to do with being direct and respectful and looking for resolution and peace. It doesn't need to be a big fight where we're going to choose sides and there's going to, now I have to quit or I'm probably going to get fired. I can be conflicted, but maybe that is it. Maybe it is truly just my own misunderstanding. And so when in policies are set, you know, to kind of be guidelines, but nothing is in stone and forever because something that might be harmful might be written down as a part of our work policy or the way we do that. But until people see the impact of whatever it is that is causing conflict, we can't change anything without knowing. So I think it's better to have take the risk and say it. And if you're not comfortable, ask to meet with, you know, whoever it is you're having the conflict with. If that doesn't resolve, you can have a third person come, maybe a supervisor or somebody come and be a part of that. If we're a part of an organization that's working to be healthy and wanting to be healthy, not just for sure, people doing direct service want to try to be healthy, but people who provide services to direct service providers want to really be healthy because we are the examples of how to live in peace. All of us, everybody who's doing advocacy, everybody who's doing education, training, and technical assistance wants to be, you know, at peace and be the example. And we don't have all the answers, but we share all kinds of wisdom. And each of you has pieces of that. So if you don't agree with something, that's okay. You know, but if it's something that's causing problems, we need to talk about it and don't be scared of it. You know, and it takes a lot of courage, but you'd be surprised how much about 95% of conflict and misunderstanding is simply that. It is a misunderstanding because it wasn't the intent of somebody to cause harm. And then definitely there are people who are not healthy because of life circumstances or things that have happened in the past that they've become functioning in a certain way. And that also needs to be handled in a way that doesn't cause harm to others. I mean, that's where the supervisors or, you know, people get involved. Is there
Yeah.
anything you can think of?
No, I think that's great. I think, you know, conflict is that's how we learn, that's how we grow. Cinnamon wrote, you know, celebrating differences, having a first do no harm approach to that helping. I think those are all really great. And then looking at paternalism, I think that's a word that's like, what is that, right? But it's looking about those who are in positions of power. It kind of goes back to some of that power hoarding stuff too, right? Like that I know the right way of doing things. And so we're just going to do it my way. You don't need to know all the stuff, all the specifics. We're just going to do it my way because I have the right way. And those that do have power often don't think it's important or necessary to understand the viewpoint or experiences of anybody else, right? So those, whether it's a tribal chairperson or an executive director or someone in some sort of positions of power, and sometimes those without power understand that they don't have it, and they understand who does, right? We know who has power in any situation. And so really looking at how are we, you know, how are we careful with the power that we have? And sometimes, you know, if we don't even recognize the power that we do have, the positional power that we have, or the relational power that we have, we can abuse that power because we don't even recognize it. I know I've been guilty of, I'll say something and I'll think that what I say carries the same weight as anybody else in the staff. And then I realize, you know, oh, everybody agrees with me. That's awesome. Like everybody thinks I have a great idea. Well, no, it's because I'm the director. So they're like, oh yeah, well, let's do it that way. I'm thinking it carries the same weight as everyone else. And so I think, you know, of course, I think we have a good, a different staff dynamic. And so people will be like, no, No, I don't think that's a great idea, Nicole. But I think we have to recognize those things. Otherwise, that can happen. And then we think, oh yeah, it's because I have all the great ideas. No, it's because we're not really listening and we're not recognizing the power that we do have in making space to make sure that everyone's voice is heard and valued in those decisions. All right, we have a few more to go, and then I want to get to the real work on what is our work around decolonizing?
So what we are talking about is some of the habits that we have, not just in our workplace, but in our lives. Just creating some space to talk about the habits, and maybe we say, I don't have any of those habits, but maybe we see this in other people. The idea that progress means that it's bigger and more, better, having the biggest budget, having the most amount of work and all this other stuff, where for me, progress might be just maintaining stability in our program, making sure that the advocates are healthy, making sure that I myself am healthy. Forgetting this, we're all still in a pandemic. We're on the tail end of something, but we have just gone through that. We have a trial going on in our state that is being watched by the world. We have been through huge changes, huge debates, a political system that is going like this. VAWA is not fully, reauthorized, and we have lots of things up in the air. So just for some people, this might look different, but the idea that we have to have the best, we have to have the most, we have to have the biggest office, we have to have the best car, we have to have the nicest clothes, we have to do, that might be a different value system of somebody else. And so when we buy into that, or when we feed into that, we can feel inadequate, and we may become more judgmental of other people that don't have that same value. So that's one of the things that can happen real easy. And you'll see it in teenagers, where they want to have like new religion clothes, or they have to have this, or they have to have that, the latest game, the biggest phone, the newest iPhone, all these things that bigger is best. And that is not it doesn't feel right for some people because it's not a part of their value system. Okay.
Yeah, it's really connected to the quantity over quality too, and needing to have more rather than looking at the quality of something. So we have the right to comfort. We see that a lot when there's hard conversations, right? And we need to have some of those hard conversations. And then we have people who are like, no, we can't talk about that. Like, that hurt my feelings, or that makes me uncomfortable. Right? But sometimes in order to grow, in order to really address many of these things that we're talking about, because really the roots of gender-based violence, of domestic violence, of sexual violence, of sex trafficking, is oppression, is racism, is sexism. So we have to have those conversations, right? We cannot sit in this, I have the right to comfort, and so I don't want to talk about anything that might make me look at myself internally, that might bring me any discomfort. So if you think about growing pains, right? When you're growing, when you're a teenager and your legs hurt so bad because you're growing. I grew really fast. I'm almost 5'10", and my legs used to hurt all the time from growing pains, right? And that's a part of growth. And just with internal growth is the same thing. It hurts. It hurts to grow because we have to learn some hard truths about ourselves. We might have to learn some hard truths about our communities. We have to sit with some stuff that makes us have to grow and be introspective and pray and contemplate, like, wow, I was raised with all of these teachings that maybe are really harmful, or because of violence, I have, learned my coping skills have been harmful. And so I think, we need to move past this. I have this right to comfort, because we won't grow if we sit in that. There's discomfort in growth. Cinnamon said, yes, we grow from being uncomfortable, creating space for others to share their knowledge or to grow themselves. Absolutely. All right. Linda, you want to talk about objectivity? And then I think we'll get to the decolonizing.
There also is the idea, when you think about objectivity, is that as advocates or as community service, providers, that we want to have the ability to be objective, but it's lacking favoritism from one side to another. So we want to be able to see all of it, right? We don't want to get stuck in how we think or how we feel or how we've experienced. These are things that come in our 40-hour teachings when we're talking about who we are and how we present ourselves every day is based on all of our past experiences, which for some people leads them to believe that they're correct in every aspect of how they think, feel, and talk. And anybody who's a little bit different or somebody who is different is wrong. But we want to be able to, remain open. I don't know. How else can I say that, Nicole?
No, I think that's perfect.
Okay.
So I'm just doing a time check. So we have about 40 minutes left. So we'll move on to talk about what do we mean by decolonizing. Oops. Let's see if I can. All right. So what do we mean when we talk about decolonizing? So these are, like Linda said, these are some guidelines and some things that we developed in our one of our visioning meetings with our staff and our members and our circle keepers. So one is like an actual practice, whether it be through ceremony, lifting up the sacredness of women, children, of our people, celebrating, whether it's naming rituals, coming of age ceremonies, different, wiping of tear ceremonies, different practices that we have, right? Like having those, bringing those back, and making sure we lift those up.
I think that when we're talking about that what can happen and when we're getting removed from being present is when we're worried or obsessing about the future and worried about it, or we're continuously thinking about the past or things that happened. And this is what you said to me a year ago and I can't forget it. And, so our people were so genius that they had many ways to bring us back to present. And one of those was with the use of either rattles or with parts of what the Creator gave to us to take care of ourselves. So what this was pushing back to was remembering who we are. And if we don't know or we're not sure about ritual or practice, making sure we make some space to be around and participate, not meaning we have to go there and sing a song, or we have to go there especially if we don't think we know or we're not confident. Go with where people help you to feel good about being yourself, being Anishinaabe, being Dakota, being Lakota, being Ho-Chunk, whoever you are, that you get to know more about what did your ancestors do. And it is in your memory. I've sat in ceremony and did not know songs, but somehow I thought I heard them before, and it was before YouTube. And so I was like, how do I know this song? Well, your memory and your blood remembers, and your ancestors understanding that they're with us in our memory, and they're not just in our diseases we carry forward, because it's 50% lifestyle is how it affects your house, but it's also 50% of what you've inherited. But you didn't just inherit, you've inherited really, really good things, awesome things that can help us to survive and help other people to survive many things. And most of us have survived many things. I wanted to say that those things are used to help us, and some is healing, but some is to help us to remember who we are, where we're at, and that we're okay right now. That kind of thing. It brings you back to center. Elders do have a responsibility to share knowledge, and non-elders have the duty to respectfully learn the traditions without shaming. If somebody, you ever get in a position, I have been in positions with people that assume they were elders. Sometimes there is just there is people who have experienced a lot of trauma, and they come across as angry and bitter, and they try to make you feel bad that you don't know your language, or make you feel bad that you didn't wear that skirt correctly, or it's too short, or it's this or it's that. Those are not the people you will be learning from. You are learning, if anything, from that is that that is something I don't want to ever do to somebody, is to make them feel they are not a part of the big circle, because we all have a part. So anybody who does that is not my teacher, except they're teaching me how I don't want to do that to anybody. So the teacher will present itself, hopefully, when you are ready, and you have to extend yourself. I used to have to drive lots of miles to go to ceremony and commit myself to hours and hours and sometimes days of being places that I was not that comfortable in. But then the learning, the gift you get back. So hopefully you get yourself, you're not obligated. I did teach my kids. I was raised that I had to respect my elders, but that was before I knew some of the elders. Nobody told me that some of those people that were older in my life would hurt me or could cause harm, even in my family. So I raised my kids with, yeah, if an elder is respectful to you, you will respect them, but I'm not going to force you to do something that somebody says that in your heart and who you are, you know it's not right. Or if they're being mean, you don't have to stand there and listen. So, I mean, there's such a duality, because so many of us have been affected by colonization and the impact of colonization, that we can be harmful. So we want to make sure that we're giving permission to people to speak about what they know that brings peace and love of self and love of community. And also we give permission that you don't have to stand there and be abused by somebody. So I don't know. Can you think of anything else with that?
I think that you said it perfectly. Yeah. And that goes, all of this kind of goes together, but looking at our, commitment to recover, and you talked about this already, to recover our tradition and strengthen our spiritual practices, right? Like there's a reason we don't, many of us don't know all of those things, right? Like that was taken from us. It was intentional for us to not know that. And so there's no shame in having to try and reconnect and to relearn. Like many of us don't know that. And so we're trying to learn, and that's all we can do is to try and to seek out people that might be able to help us. And sometimes our teachers will not be elders by age, but they will be elders by knowledge. And I think that's a difference too, is thinking about sometimes our elders are not people that are an elder through age. It's because they have those teachings, and we can learn from them.
I would watch children, little tiny kids. I mean, 4, 5, 6 years old, and how they are so loving and so open to being kind to other people. And some are learning how to be mean. But I mean, some of the things I've witnessed with little tiny people, they're not so bitter and hurt, right?
Oops, sorry.
By what's happened.
Oops, sorry. See, there I go again, not knowing how to use technology. And then, also thinking of, being respectful of like all genders, gender nonconforming, and then, all ages, that we all have, a role in contributing, that we all have, teachings that we have that we can learn from each other, that, letting go of some of those, harmful practices that we've learned. It kind of goes back to that either or thinking, right? Like you know, we must look to only to our elders, right? And we don't think about our young people and all the things. I learned from, my grandson's going to be 4 in a couple of weeks, and I learn from him all the time. I mean, there's just like an innocence, and just you learn how to connect to your joy in different ways from those young people. And so so just looking at the role that we all have in contributing to our community and how we are learning from each other.
So when you think of how everybody is included, I actually went through and got names of our my family's ancestry. And I took, because some of it, a lot of the older people that were my great grandma, her and her family's names were going back, and I took it to some people who could translate that are fluent, but they also teach in an immersion program. I took it to 2 different people and said, "What do these names mean?" And the one was looking at me and he said, "Well, this is the way the people up by Canada talk. The Anishinaabe have a different dialect that sounds a little bit different than the people that are from the Leech Lake area." And he said, this word here, he said it translates into 2. And he said, it says that this person was either a chief, but he said that didn't necessarily mean they were the chief of the whole tribe, but it meant head of something. So it could have been their family. But he said this name is 2 hearts. And he said, I would think from what I've read historically that this person would have been either a gay man or would have been somebody who had partnerships with 2, you know, men and women, the genders. So, and I said, well, would that have been really common? He said it was very common because they just loved the people, you know, whoever that was. There were different skills all people had in our circle, and everybody had a role, and their gifts naturally floated up to the top of what were you going to do for the people? What was your role? And so I know with the Lakota, Dakota, Nakota, that the Winkta had certain responsibilities that the rest of the people couldn't do. They didn't have the skill set to do those, and they weren't the gifts that the Creator gave everybody, but only that group in their tribe could do these certain things for the tribe. So all of us have those gifts. So it meant to be more inclusive of everybody, and understanding that I'm sitting with somebody who has gifts that are going to help the people. And I might not know what they are, but they're going to show up here. The gifts are, and whatever they're going to do, and life will be better for everybody if we honor and respect each other and the gifts that we bring forward. Meaning safe healing ceremonies are available to those who experience gender-based violence. We have had, and as a part of our teaching and training, ceremonies that we want to ensure that as advocates and as people who are helping in the community, that we're bringing people, if we bring them, to places where there will be no harm done to them. And we need to make sure that we're aware of it. We don't just pick, and I've taken people to churches and I've taken them to different ceremonies, but the ceremony piece, I want to make sure that I'm not taking them to somewhere where somebody's going to be preying on them, or somebody's going to be insinuating that, you know, they need to be with them. And it sounds crazy, but that stuff is, anywhere humans are, we tend to mess things up. So we want to be aware as advocates that we have a level of responsibility that if you say, oh, I go over here, then they're going to trust that you're sending them someplace that is not going to hurt them. And so we just want to be aware of that as advocates. And it means, if that means some of us got to learn how to do ceremony and have ceremony for other women or children or men, whatever we got to do to assure that there are safe healing spaces in ceremonies in our community. Okay.
So when we look at decolonization or liberation, it's synonymous with full and interdependent worthiness, right? And embracing all of that. So these are some guidelines that we practice at our organization. And So one of them is just to try on. So what does that mean, try on? It means you just try things out. Like there might be a practice or something new, and just trying it on and see how it works for you, see if it's a good fit for you, but to kind of get rid of our judgment, right? Because sometimes we see something different or new, and we have all kinds of judgment when we see it. And so it's really to let go of that judgment. I know I have been guilty before of going, oh, we've tried that before, so it's not going to work. Well, maybe somebody has a new spin on it and is going to make it, or maybe right now is the perfect time to try that idea. Maybe it wasn't ready 10 years ago. And so just to try things on, or maybe it's a new way of being in community with each other.
And this kind of goes back to what we were talking about before. It is okay to disagree with somebody. In fact, we're not all the same, and that's the real beauty of it. But it is not okay to attack other people or ourselves, or to rip ourselves apart because we don't understand why somebody is doing what they're doing in our work. Or, you know, we do have the obligation, responsibility to try to understand what other people are doing and what went into that and why they said the things they said. And it might be totally off track from what I was thinking it was, but so disagreement is fine. You're not going to agree with everybody, but guess what? We do have to work with almost everybody. So we do want to be able to provide our services with competence and with trust and with the confidentiality. And we need to be able to work together as staff. And then if we need technical assistance, to be able to trust our TA providers. And we might not agree, but we need to work to have an understanding between ourselves and other people. It doesn't mean I'm wrong. It doesn't mean you're wrong. It means we just didn't agree on this, and we need to try to understand so that we can make it work.
And along with that is self-focus. So if I do disagree with Linda, it's about what was it for me, and saying, you know, like not going in and saying you did blah blah blah, but saying, you know, I feel so, you know, really taking ownership of that for myself and keeping it on me, and not because I have no control over what Linda does or says. I have control over me. So what is it? Oftentimes when we have a really strong reaction to something, it's because it brought something up for us, right? And so really sitting with that and trying to figure out, like, what did that bring up for me, or what is that hitting on for me? Because that's something that I need to work on for me. That's a hurt that that's mine. It's not Linda's. Linda said something that triggered it for me, but it's not Linda's. It's mine. And so really having that self-focus and looking a little deeper at what is it, you know, for us when something like that comes up.
In fact, even these disagreements that we might have, or these different ideas that don't sit right with us, are not to teach us about other people and what jerks other people can be, or how they're inappropriate, or they offended me, or they hurt my feelings. The spiritual essence of it all is just as simplistic as what she said. The only person I can control is me. Not just control. I can't control what so-and-so said to me. I can't control what they think about me. In fact, some of that's none of my business. But what I can control is my reaction and my response to all of it. I can't control other people and make them be the way I want them to be. I can't make them take back what they said or make them do things different, but I can control the way I respond to all of it. And if I don't agree with it, or if I don't think it's right, I need to have the way that I heard it was said before was, it doesn't have to be where I have to raise my voice to get your attention. I'll wait until everything's calm and then we can talk about it if it's necessary. Because sometimes all we need is the space and time to help things to calm back down to where I was like, oh my God. And you never ever know what somebody else is dealing with. If they've had a traumatic grief in the last year, if they've got health issues, if they're going through a breakup, if somebody has harmed them this morning, if they crash their car, if they don't have any money, if their child is an addict, you have no idea. So before you get really offended by somebody, when we keep the focus on it's my responsibility to keep my feeling, I need to be aware of my feelings instead of putting my feelings on everybody else, then I grow internally as a human being and as a spirit. So I think that that's a perfect way. And I am, we're talking about intent and impact. So what my intention might have been was I'm going to go to work and I'm going to do a really good job and I'm going to get all this stuff done. And I might go into the office and shut my door. And in my mind, I had it all made up on my 45-minute drive to work, what I was going to do. But 3 of the people in the office with me just watched me walk straight in and shut my door. And now they feel weird about what I just did. So I've had people, can I come in or did you want to be alone? No, I had it in my head. I knew what I thought I was doing, but my impact on everybody else around me might have been different and caused them to feel somehow, about what I'm doing. And it wasn't anything to do with them, but my intent was, I thought, good, but the impact came off sideways on somebody else. So what I had to do was explain what I was going to do. Not that I had to, but I wanted to, because I don't want people feeling bad about something I'm doing, right? Who can I control? Just me. I don't know. That the way somebody is might come across different. And it has nothing to do with me personally. I used to, as a survivor, I would take everything personally. The sun didn't shine because blah, blah, I did this, or that this got broke because of me. Everything was kind of my fault. And so we have to be careful that if we didn't do our healing, that we could hurt people with the way, just how we're thinking. And it's really could have nothing to do with us. So I don't know. Can you think of anything to add to that?
I think that's really good. I think it's, I think it's really important to have that understanding of the impact that we have on others. And certainly it's not, our intent maybe to hurt that person, but we certainly can impact people with our words and our actions. Brittany Garcia said, be empathetic and kind to others. We are all human. Yeah, and having, being gracious. And that goes into the 100% responsibility, right? So if I know I've harmed someone, I need to take responsibility for my role, right? Like I'm certainly not responsible for someone else's feelings, but I am responsible for my actions. And I'm responsible for if I've done something that's harmful to make amends or to make things to make things different for me, like make sure I don't do that again. So if I apologize, right, like that's the thing with apologies. If I apologize, that means I'm going to do something different moving forward. It doesn't mean I'm going to say I'm sorry and then tomorrow I'm going to do the same thing to you, right? It's about taking 100% responsibility and changing my actions so that I'm not causing that same harm.
Having a decolonizing mindset. We talked about this. Most of us have these, we have them printed and hanging on our walls so we can see them, because we are in a world every single day that is running on oppression and creating it. It was created and set up for somebody, but it was mostly not for us. So to go against it and to try to live differently takes intent. And it means I have to remind myself, because I'm always responding to what is going on in community, in society, and with the rules and policies set up by other people to mandate behavior. And so I have to be intentional about how I am walking through the world, and that I'm looking through it with a different lens of being decolonized. I don't want to step into that where I am using the tools of people who oppress others, especially anywhere, but especially against anybody I'm working with in my family. And it takes intention. It doesn't just oh yeah, I read those, now that's it. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. No, we have to read them, reread them, rethink it all, and practice, practice, practice. I don't know how else to say it.
No, that's perfect. And into going back to like, what are those universal truths that we have? What are the, for Anishinaabe, we have the 7 grandfather teachings. What are those things we have from our different cultural practices, our different cultural traditions that we can pull from when we think about decolonizing mindset? And Cinnamon said to operate with integrity. Absolutely.
And for some, integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody is watching, right? That it's not because we're going to get in trouble, but because it feels better to do the right thing.
So we wanted to have, so we have 15 minutes left. We wanted to have a discussion. And so certainly if you want to speak, otherwise you can type it in the chat. I'm going to pull back up the slide on the habits. And I want you to think about what habit you would most like to interrupt for yourself. I know I've had to do a lot of work on perfectionism. That's been huge for me. And so what habit would you most like to interrupt? Again, you can say it you can raise your hand and they will unmute you, or you can type it into the chat. Carol LaPointe, let's see.
You can go ahead, Carol, you are unmuted.
And I'm reading in the chat, we have Melanie James said defensiveness, Chastity said fear of open conflict, Jessica, perfectionism, competition, fear of open conflict. Oh, Carol said she doesn't have a mic. Okay. She wants to stop having fear of open conflict. I think that's a big one for a lot of people. Kiana. So what can we do? What are your thoughts around how you would like to interrupt that habit? I would like to confront staff without feeling bad. Say more about that, Carol. Because when I hear confront, then I think that's already coming from a defensiveness perspective. So, it's about having conversations, right? It's about sharing our truth. It's about, yeah, we're not all going to get along. But then going back to these guidelines, right? And looking at the intent and impact, having a self-focus, right? So looking at what is the, if there's stuff that has been said, like what is that for me? What does that mean for me? How am I taking 100% responsibility and having that decolonizing mindset? Okay. Chastity said being honest, use motivational interviewing tactics, listening. That is great. Carol said when there are certain behaviors that are exhibited or occurring, I want to be able to bring it up at the time it happens. I usually just let it go and hope it gets better. That's great. I think sometimes for me, and I don't know what this, how this feels for you. Sometimes for me, if I feel instantly like upset about something, say Linda says something at our staff meeting and it instantly like I get upset about it. There are two ways to approach it. One, if you're in a good spot where you're like, hey, Linda, can we talk after the staff meeting today? One-on-one. And then, to say, hey, I felt, this when you said this, and not really sure if that was your intent. Sometimes when I feel especially triggered by something, I have to process it for a minute. And that's my own stuff. But I think for some people, it's helpful to be able to process what it is without being reactionary, right? Because sometimes when we just react, we get defensive. And so to really sit back and think like, what is it for me? Going back to that self-focus, thinking about the intent and impact, and then coming back and saying, hey, can we sit down? Like I felt really hurt today when you said, whatever it was that you said, Linda, that hurt my feelings. And I would really like to see this happen, or just letting it be what it is. Brittany said, and I know someone just raised their hand, but I want to read what Brittany said. As a survivor, I've had to work on defensiveness. I learned defensiveness to try to protect myself, but that meant I would take everything personal. I had to learn that everything isn't about me, that others have their own feelings, and that there is a story behind them, behind their actions. They are human and have their own lives going on, that everything that impacts me isn't about me. I am but one individual who is making my way through life, and that I need to be mindful of how I presented myself and how my actions impacted others. That is a really big teaching. It is a really big teaching. I'm so glad that you were able to come to that, because that's hard. It's really hard when we've been hurt, to be able to come to that. So thank you for sharing that. I can't remember who raised their hand now.
It was Chastity.
Oh, thank you. Chastity, can we unmute?
Yep, she's ready to go. If she wants to speak, feel free, Chastity. Oh, Chastity's saying her camera has to be on to speak. Yeah, okay, sorry about that. If you wouldn't mind, Chastity, to throw it in the chat, that would be great as well.
I love technology when it works. Your concern was about letting it go. Can you say more about that? Is that about the, just letting it go and hoping it gets better? Yeah, I mean, I think definitely we want to make sure, I think when that happens, when we just let things go, sometimes it starts to build up if we're not speaking our truth, right? It keeps coming up. And so I do think it's important when something comes up, when there's a hurt, when there's something that's been said or an action, to take the time to process it and have that self-focus, but to make sure that you come back around and talk to that person, because that does build up over time, and then stuff comes out sideways, right? Because you're holding on to this stuff. I mean, how many of you have had a disagreement with someone and they brought something up that happened 20 years ago, or, like someone that you have in your family, or, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and you're like, whoa, where did that come from? And I had no idea that hurt you, but yeah. It's because we hang on to stuff, and then it comes up, we throw everything at someone when we're mad. Thank you for bringing that up. That's really important.
And that term, nip it in the bud, get it while it's little and not big. And it really is not helpful for me to have an issue with Nicole. And then I get on the phone and I talk to Cinnamon about my issue with Nicole. Then I get on the phone and I talk to Jen at the office about my issue with Nicole. Then I'll talk to Dan about my issue with Nicole. I'm talking to everybody except Nicole, where I might feel better. But also there can be a part where somebody's gaining momentum to try to come at this person. Any type of stuff that is causing even more problems is not what we want to be involved in. When we're working for peace and resolution, we need to be trying to practice that in our personal life and in our professional life. So it would be best if I went to Nicole respectfully and I talked to her, made time when she has time to listen to what I said. And remember, about 95% of the time, it's a misunderstanding. You know, she could have been tired and said something and it wasn't even directed towards me, but because of how I was feeling, I took it real personal. And sometimes there are people who are working on trauma and they're not healthy, or they've acquired some habits that don't work in our workspaces. And that'll have to be, it'll surface and then it'll resurface and then it'll resurface till management or supervisors will no longer be able to just ignore any of it. They're going to have to do something about it. So it shows, but most of the time there's ways to work things out.
Yeah, but it takes work, right? It takes intention, and it takes practice. And some days we might be great at it and other days not so great. And so it's about being mindful and thinking about them. So, you know, in closing, we only have about 4 minutes left. And thank you everyone for sharing and for, you know, participating in the conversation and sharing everything you've said. But to really think about the ways that you want to interrupt these habits when you see them, whether it's in your organization, whether it's in your family, your community, wherever those show up, to think about how to interrupt that. And sometimes it helps to have an accountability partner where you're like, hey, Linda, I am terrible at, you know, like this always, you know, I get defensive a lot. When you start to see that, can you, you know, text me or you know, something that helps to interrupt that habit? Because sometimes we don't see it. Like we know it's there, but we don't always see it when it's happening. And then how do we continue to share and reinforce these guidelines for decolonizing our work? Again, it's always, it's a work in progress, right? Like we have these in big posters on our wall of our office. We bring them to our meetings. We talk about them with our staff, and it's a constant reminder. You know, habits, the only way to break a habit is to have an intentional practice that we put in its place. And so that's what this is to really think about our decolonizing work as replacing our habits with some practices based on our universal truths and our teachings from our cultural perspective as Indigenous people.
Yeah.
Linda, did you have anything to add?
I just want to say thank you for everything that you do to help your people and to help our communities be healthy and well and to heal from the traumas that are happening all over the place. And hopefully we're all on the right track and that things will be getting better in a way that is easy for us to see, that we don't have to continue to have responses to horrific crime, that we'll be working more on the healing parts of it.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate being with you all today and sending lots of love to you and your communities. Thank you for the work you do.
Honor and gratitude to the two of you for coming. Thank you guys so much. And all of you sharing space with us today, thank you again for attending. It has been so informational, inspiring. A lot of stuff I jotted down that I'm like, yes, yes, yes. You know, decolonization equaling full and interdependent worthiness was one of my favorite things. Super reflective and just reminding us that it starts with all of us, right? And building our worth up so that we can know, hey, we can go up to those power hoarders and, hey, I have a conflict and I'm going to talk to you about it because I am worthy. And I just so much gratitude for you. So thank you all, and thank you all for attending. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Enjoy the sunshine if you all have it. Take care.
Bye.